Welcome to this Tech Week webinar on what established businesses can learn from startups. Just a little bit about the format of this session. You're all muted, and we're just going to keep everybody muted for the duration of the session. Please use the chat function in Zoom if you want to get our attention. We're recording the session today, and we'll make that available afterwards. Shortly, I'll introduce you all to Adam Lyness, who will be taking you through the webinar today, which will take us roughly 25 minutes. Then we'll take questions at the end. We'll do this through the Zoom chat. So if you do have any questions, please type them in there at any point when you think of them, and I'll collate them at the end and put them to Adam. As for who we are, I'm Andrew Dixon. I'm a co-founder of Intranel, along with Adam. We're a software and hardware development and consulting company based in Christchurch. We've been working with a wide range of clients, from small two-person startups to large organizations with thousands of employees. Adam is a co-founder of Intranel. He today will be sharing his learnings about innovating within established organizations. So I'll hand over to Adam now to take you through the talk, but please remember, send any questions you have through to the chat area and we'll get through as many of them as we have time for. Adam, over to you.
Cheers, Andy. I'll just share my screen here so we can kick off the off. So, yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to this Tech Week webinar on innovation with an established business. I'm actually just going to have to move this red video over here. There we go. I'm Adam. As Andy covered, my role's in business development, and that pretty much means everything and anything in a small business. So over the years, we've worked with a bunch of startups as well as some fairly big corporate enterprises. So we've seen a lot of different approaches to innovation. We've also founded some of our own businesses with varying degrees of success, and that's provided plenty of opportunities to learn. Plan today is to explore what established organizations can borrow from startups to innovate better. I doubt this is going to be completely new territory, as concepts like lean thinking and agile are already fairly well spread across most levels of business. Established businesses, though, do have different sets of constraints and advantages, so I think it's worth exploring how startup methodologies translate. And of course, while startups don't have a monopoly on best practice, they do tend to be resource constrained and often in a race to market. And this forces them to focus on validating ideas at minimal cost. And I think that's an approach that is valuable for any enterprise. So my bit's going to take a little over 20 minutes. Should leave plenty of time for a bit of Q&A at the end. And as Andy covered, feel free to throw questions at the chat window. So structure's going to loosely be to talk about what we mean by innovation, then cover different approaches that established businesses and startups take, as well as some of the advantages each has and why you should innovate. We'll move on to discussing constraints in a corporate environment in more detail, as well as steps to mitigate that. Then we'll cover a typical startup process to develop and validate an idea and how that translates to an established business context before finishing up. So what do we mean by innovation and where does it sit in the big picture? It's a fairly subjective term, but to me it broadly means creating value from new ideas. So an innovative idea tends to be novel, or at least a new approach and likely to differentiate you from competitors. So with anything novel, there's going to be an element of risk and uncertainty. So it's partly a process of discovery. And I think that element of novelty is important. So, a basic mobile app 20 years after everyone else may feel innovative, but it probably isn't. And innovation is closely linked to R&D, which is also a slippery term. I tend to use them fairly interchangeably, although in business, I guess we tend to think more towards commercial outcomes. On that note, it's worth remembering that pure research is vital as the ultimate driver of other innovation. So I guess just one example there with Bardeen and Bratton at Bell Laboratories, they needed to be curious about fundamental properties of semiconductors to enable the internet to happen 30 years later after the invention of the transistor. Innovation's a key driver of growth, especially in the tech sector. And I use growth in a broad sense and include challenges like mitigating climate change and inequality, as well as just raw economics. It is a big subject, but there's an acceptance that we can do better. New Zealand's R&D spend sits well down the OECD average. So if we can innovate more efficiently and improve its returns to business, we can build a better economy without simply scaling extractive industries. Unlike Australia, we can't just dig another hole. So in a nutshell, we need to do things better. Innovation isn't just the domain of 20-something grads running startups and Elon Musk types. As an established business, you're already a domain expert. You've got deep knowledge of your market space, and probably most importantly, you already have customers. Any innovative ideas that filter through, they're likely going to be in response to a real validated need from your operations. And without speculating maybe on the age of the audience today, it also turns out that most successful entrepreneurs tend to be over 40. They've worked in industry for some time. So, again, that domain experience counts for a lot. When we look at startups, most new startups fail precisely because developing capability, product market fit, and building a customer base is difficult and risky. And there are plenty of examples of established innovation engines across business. And we could think Amazon's web services. It's now one of their most lucrative products, and it came from infrastructure that already built around retail sales. 3M's another example. It's a massive conglomerate, but their whole brand is built around science and innovation. I think the story of 3M Post-it notes is a good example, maybe a bias towards success stories and innovation. The short version goes that they were attempting to create a strong adhesive, and they accidentally discovered a weak one that peeled off everything. So they're about to throw this new glue away before realizing the potential for a removable adhesive, and the Post-it note was born. Despite their advantages, established organizations often have cultural, resourcing, and leadership constraints that can cramp innovation. So let's go back to that 3M example. In reality, the innovation behind Post-it notes bounced around internally for 10 years. It had multiple knockbacks by senior management and failed launches before they finally achieved product market fit by sending truck tons of free samples to offices. So only at that point did many businesses fall in love with the Post-it notes and reorder them. And this illustration illustrates that innovation can be difficult and time-consuming, and sometimes it only makes it across the line by the narrowest of margins. So, stops business from innovating effectively. Fear or risk aversion is a big barrier to innovation. In essence, frustrated entrepreneurs avoid risk. Okay, I may have made that up. It's not really a thing. Innovation is risky by definition and may take several years to generate a return. Now, this can create pressure from stakeholders and senior leadership trying to meet maybe short-term financial targets. On top of this, you've got practical stuff around who leads innovation projects, how you fill knowledge, capacity gaps, and how you build acceptance of a fail-fast culture where new ideas can be tested efficiently without fear of failure. One example in this space is a project we did with Royal Bank of Scotland in London 2011-2012. The remit was to create an innovative online platform for SMEs. And we helped them do just that and produce several concepts, with the favorite being an idea called Reputate. So this was a novel way to help businesses build a reputation score based on interactions with customers, a little similar to how Trustpilot operates now. And with over 2 million SME customers, the bank was in a really strong position to achieve critical mass pretty quickly. And we spent several months helping refine the concept ready for an MVP build. Now, everything was going swimmingly until the risk people, maybe 2 levels over our head, got hold of it, and they forced a pivot back to a much, much less innovative content platform. And here, the basic issue appeared to be that the brand had pretty much already been trashed in the media after massive government bailouts in the wake of the GFC, and their risk appetite was very low. So this is maybe a good example of how it's harder to innovate if you've lost social license. So I think the fear response is understandable because innovation is risky, but in New Zealand especially, I think we need to shift the balance more towards GREED, another acronym that I just made up, greater returns on equity with effective development. And the benefits of innovation are fairly self-evident, really. It's essential to achieving competitive advantage and staying in business long-term. The trick to more successful innovation is to instill techniques and processes that give leaders confidence to make more investment more confidently. The startup methodologies have evolved to reduce risks by using proven techniques to evaluate new ideas, basically how to fail fast in startup lingo. Startups are small, they're tight on resources, so focus is essential. Having a bigger budget and a complex existing business model can actually make that focus a bit harder to achieve. So if you're thinking like a startup, what is a good innovation process? I think to begin with, organizations need focus at leadership level to establish what innovation should mean for them. So this strategy is going to be influenced by the sector you're in, your internal capabilities, and the competitive landscape. I guess an early stage mid-tech business is more likely to be innovation focused, say, than a Lyness company, but not always. You might explore how you can take advantage of emerging tech like AI, what digital convergence and big data means for you. And most importantly, thinking about who's going to eat your lunch if you don't innovate. How nimble your organization is and where innovation currently sits is also going to shape your thinking. I think a good thought exercise is to put an entrepreneurial hat on to look at opportunities within your sector. So to do this, you could pretend you've resigned. So you've stolen your dream team of 3 people from your organization, as well as the entire client database, and you're going to create your own startup after mortgaging your house. So I think this is entirely legit as a thought exercise, but it's actually not that popular with clients. And it's worth remembering that innovation comes in several flavors. It's okay to be a little bit vanilla in this respect. For using a car analogy, we could go with Ford's EcoBoost tech as being fairly incremental innovation, and that it's a tweak to fuel efficiency on an existing vehicle. We could call the Toyota Prius evolutionary with its hybrid powertrain, and the Tesla Model S revolutionary with its pure electric drive. I actually had second thoughts on the Tesla examples. It's not exactly that radical. I mean, it's still got 4 wheels and an engine, albeit electric. Maybe a better and more local example might be a business like Halter, which pretty much does what it says on the can, and it puts halters on cattle that provides gentle directional prompts. So the disruptive innovation here is you can now move your entire herd around with a mobile app, and this is potentially eliminating mustering and fences, which obviously are a huge chunk of the work and capital outlay in current farming. So once you've got a rough idea what you want to achieve through innovation, you can start to build an innovation pipeline, beginning with an ideas engine. So I think this has got to be more than a suggestions box, although you probably don't have to fly everyone off on corporate retreats. How you incentivize your team to think like entrepreneurs and get creative with ideas is unique to every organization. Although understanding challenges at the coalface from staff and customers is one of the best gold mines of opportunities. Ways to actively generate new ideas might include internal hackathons. This is a tool that enables Facebook to explore new ideas not currently on their product development roadmap. And of course, they don't need to be coding based either. It's also worth checking out Kickbox, a tool developed by Adobe to help employees turn ideas into real products. And that's now been open sourced. And remember that ideas can be modest. Japanese style Kaizen concepts of continuous improvement may suit you better than anything too radical. Another thing worth noting is that we've seen plenty of examples of customer-driven innovation in the contracting space. So when you've got multiple clients paying you to solve a similar problem, this is basically a gift-wrapped, market-validated idea with the potential to turn into a new product. One example here, shout out to our friends at WebTools. They built and spun off their WebTools Energy SaaS platform after observing that several market players had similar challenges. When we're evaluating and refining ideas, people need to be in a creative mindset. So it's important to give the team time to focus outside the pressures of routine business. And I am aware that that is often easier said than done. If we're evaluating opportunities, the best are likely to win an elevator pitch competition. And this is where you explain in 1 minute what the project is and how it creates value. Although, of course, there are a bunch more elaborate sort of lean canvas type tools, and it's worth exploring these as well. So I've alluded to innovation requiring a different mindset from routine operations. And to encourage this, you could think about separating your innovation team from risk and process-driven areas of the business, and maybe include people resistant to change on that list too. The common solution is to create a firewalled sandbox to develop new ideas in a risk-managed way. And speaking of risk, you may be more exposed to brand risk when executing new tech, hence extending that sandbox maybe to a separate brand or even a subsidiary can be a good idea. One example, I have a different risk appetites at play was when we were working with a cryptocurrency business in its startup phase a few years ago. And a presenter at the New Zealand Blockchain Conference got excited about the potential for a tokenized New Zealand dollar. So internally, our conversation was, well, how quick can we do this? With the answer being overnight, which we proceeded to do. And note that our focus as a startup was on the technical process and being first to market, a lot more than boring stuff like risk and compliance, which we could worry about later. So that the product was actually fairly successful, but the problem was that we depended on banking partners to provide fiat off-ramps and on-ramps for those tokens. And the banks were kind of torn here. They were simultaneously excited about distributed ledger technology, but also terrified about the brand risk of negative headlines. And in this case, the risk aversion was ultimately winning, and we had accounts closed on us. Now, the same thing still happens with crypto exchanges playing a cat and mouse game with banks in Australia. So I guess the point here is it is a balancing act, but in this case, I'd say, banks are missing out on innovation, maybe in the fintech industry, partly because they're not that great at sandboxing innovation. So your sandbox teams fleshed out some ideas. You can start to refine these into a minimal viable product. Startups draw heavily on lean thinking to test an innovative idea through building an MVP as quickly and cheaply as possible. And for me, this means a razor-sharp focus on the simplest, fastest way to evaluate an idea. When we do this, the process usually starts by generating about 4 million cool features around an idea, and then we have to painfully whittle these down to maybe 10 essential MVP ones, and all those nice-to-haves get buried safely in a product backlog. And remember that as you learn more, that MVP may change as you reprioritize or add features and as you understand the market better. So iterations are normal and expected part of the process. An MVP should be market testable, but probably shouldn't be scalable from day one, and it probably shouldn't form a critical part of your existing business process. The idea is to be able to fail fast or succeed fast whilst minimizing your investment. Speaking of investment, innovation's risky. We don't do enough of it. So governments come to the party with co-funding through agencies like Callaghan Innovation. This can cover 40% of costs and give you access to a big network of expertise, so worth considering. If you're spending over 100K, I think the threshold is, there's also the 15% R&D tax break. Although from our experience, this is best if you really enjoy documentation a lot. It requires some pretty good systems in place to track eligible activities. And also, remember that established business, you've got a track record, and you may actually be more attractive to private investors than a lot of startups. So it's worth considering angel investors and even approaching venture capital funds early on. Oh, and just in case you're thinking your innovation team can fix all your legacy IT problems with a great big project, they can't. Organizations, some of which we've worked with, can have a tendency to embark on fairly monolithic projects, and this is often accompanied by a massive requirement specification and an impressive display of feature creep. A good innovation project doesn't crush people's will to live, so don't be like, say, the NHS did in the UK and dropped $20 billion on a failed nationwide IT VRAMP. Oh yeah, I'm a tech head, so I tend to think about the marketing last. It is important. You can't validate an idea without testing the concept with actual customers. And even if that innovation is purely internal, there's still users, and they'll still need to find it valuable to actually want to use it. An innovative product can still fail without innovative marketing and that right product market fit and go-to-market plan. Now, unfortunately, startup practice tells us we can't just ask customers if they like our new idea. This is the equivalent to asking your mom if your idea is awesome. She'll almost certainly tell you that it is, and also that you're very handsome. Validation is all about behavior. So for startups, this means, will someone hand over some actual money? And startups will often test market a product before they've even built it. Think about a buy now button that puts you on a wait list. Kickstarter is basically a validation tool built around removing the risks for innovators of investing and scaling a production run before they've secured customers. In some cases, an established business can use similar approaches, or if you're in the B2B space, maybe you can get written assurances that a customer will pay for a new product. If that market validation isn't working, you may need to iterate your MVP or the marketing and the messaging around it. And there are books like the Mum Test to help out with this, but established businesses do have one key difference here, in that they can often take a shortcut if the innovation is in response to needs customers have already expressed, or around, say, internal efficiencies. In either case, you may be fairly confident that the idea adds value. Your uncertainties are more going to be around execution. Processes typically embrace agile development because this evolved to deal with uncertainties inherent in any innovative project. In agile development aligns spending with an iterative learning process around value creation, rather than starting with arbitrary fixed budgets and delivery times. Letting go of detailed budget and project plans at the start of a project is difficult, but just accept you're going to end up doing this anyway because of that uncertainty inherent with innovation. And I guess the good news is that once a project gets going, you do start to get more useful data, because you get information on velocity, which is roughly how quickly those features are actually getting delivered. Build your MVP. You're going to need to scale your innovation team into a delivery team. Now, the problem here, I guess, is if you're investing in innovation, business is likely good, but you're barely delivering to existing customers. So building that team requires first identifying knowledge or resourcing gaps. At this point, it's okay to bring external resources in to help out, although key leadership and product owner roles should reside within your organization and have time to focus because they've got that domain knowledge. For tech projects, this is often where I put my hand up, particularly when a business is exploring emerging tech like AI. And navigating this resourcing and expertise can be a challenge. Again, you can reach out to Callaghan with the regional business partner network, and they can put you in touch with a lot of organizations and people. And getting the right people into technical leadership is really important here. So in startups, you've conventionally got hackers on the tech side and hustlers on the marketing side working together to iterate, to reprioritize features as your knowledge evolves. Hopefully you've got equivalent personalities within your organization who are just gagging to sort of get onto an innovation project. And so giving those key staff a chance to work outside routine business, it can be really rewarding for them. And in turn, that's going to help you retain that talent, another bonus behind getting people onto innovation projects. So when you've built a prototype, don't take too long getting that MVP in front of real customers. If you're not at least a bit embarrassed to release it, it's probably not an MVP, although maybe don't apply this to air traffic control systems. As an established business, you're exposed to reputation risks at this point, so it's important to communicate clearly and be honest when a product is in beta phase and things might go wrong. You can mitigate risks by segmenting your client base, finding a subset of friendly users keen to try new stuff and provide some honest feedback. So you've got time to collect some data, see how things go, and do a few product iterations. Remember our iterative learn, build, and measure cycle. Success metrics are going to vary, and when to declare success or failure is a complex judgment call. But don't spend too long flogging a dead horse just because of sunk costs. So even if the idea turns out to be non-viable, I guess congratulations are in order because you've failed fast, you've learned something, and you've minimized costs. Remember, innovation is risky and it's often dependent on factors outside your control. We developed a startup called Brands to Bands around product placement in music videos. Took this to several music sector investors in 2008, but despite loving the concept, capital was extremely tight post GFC and we weren't able to raise there. A US company literally copied the entire website and concept word for word, and 1 or 2 years later raised several $1 million. You know, this is an example being how timing is often critical for an idea. On the occasion that you do knock it out of the park, you're in a really strong position. You haven't sunk much capital at this point, but you're potentially investment ready as you've demonstrated a growth path for your business. So now's a good time to think about third-party investment, how that could let you spread risks as you look to scale your idea. So we've explored some ways that business can innovate more effectively by borrowing from startups. This begins by defining your mission around innovation, how that integrates with your existing business. We moved on to generating an innovation pipeline of ideas using startup evaluation techniques to identify those best opportunities. From there, we covered building a lean delivery team with the right mix of skills, as well as building an innovation sandbox to give your team a chance to be creative away from that routine business. And once an idea is rounded out, we talked about testing product market fit early on and keeping the scope narrow with an MVP to keep complexity manageable and ensure ideas can be tested efficiently with that fail fast mindset. When we're building a prototype, agile processes are vital to maintain focus and mitigate that uncertainty rather than attempting monolithic requirements-driven projects. Market testing an idea early while communicating clearly, managing user expectations again is important, allowing several iterations of an idea before calling success or failure. And finally, we reiterated that failing fast is actually okay. It's a normal part of the innovation cycle and will likely provide a lot of useful data for the next project. All right, that's me. Thanks very much for your time and attention. I'll pass the mic over to Andy and run through some of the questions that may have come through.
People, please feel free to add any other questions that you have. I've got a question here from Mark. Thank you, Mark. Adam, in measurable terms, what does success look like for an innovation in an established business?
Yeah, it's really subjective, I guess, and it depends on the context of the business. So we've seen innovation projects with clients where the outcome isn't necessarily something that's going to be product ready, but they could be very focused just on building capability or learning new tech. So success might be as simple as we want, say, 3 people within our team to understand the process around, say, building an AI model to test something within our business context. And from there, they might build a small internal prototype, which might not actually then go on to become a product, but they've learned, and from there they can then start to continue to innovate with that new knowledge and use that to identify gaps within their business. So it may be 1 or 2 projects down the line that actually get turned into the actual product. Often with businesses, I guess what they're looking to do is say, okay, cool, we think we can add value here. We think customers will pay for it. So what does that success metric look like? Well, if you're a SaaS business, you might introduce a new value-added feature. You might try and roll that set of customers. So it could be how many people are actually prepared to pay for it. Or it could be with a new feature early on. It's like, what's the engagement like? How many people use it? If you've got high engagement with that beta group, and the feedback is that people love it, then you could introduce it as a paid feature. So again, it's highly variable. Will depend depend on the business, but ultimately, I think you do need to collect some data from getting the product or the new feature in front of real users.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of questions here that we received via the submission form prior to the webinar. How could a company, or should a company, reward ideas from internal staff?
In my experience, it doesn't necessarily need to be a to be handing out vouchers or financial rewards. I think internally, if people feel that they can contribute and that they're listened to and that they can raise something and then have an opportunity to discuss it, throw around ideas, do some brainstorming, look at the pros and cons, and they're invited to participate in that process internally, that's generally going to be reward in itself. And I guess we've seen a lot of ideas. Sometimes they come from the leadership team, sometimes they come from staff working more at the delivery side of the business. So I'd say my advice here is make sure you've got mechanisms that you can have those discussions and collect that feedback and be proactive there. I mean, engage staff, have the conversations as opposed to just relying on people to raise things.
How long is too long to innovate towards the same idea?
Oh, that's really difficult. So it's a judgment call. I mean, there's so many anecdotes on businesses that are now highly successful where people were sort of almost flogging that dead horse for years and years and years before suddenly they achieve product market fit, or the timing was right, and it suddenly started to resonate as a product. So I mean, partly the answer to that is, as long as you're enthused and passionate, and you believe in it, and your team believes in it, that's going to be a factor. But again, you want to avoid that sunk cost fallacy as well. So if you set your metrics out early on, establish what you want to achieve, how you're going to sort of test a beta and collect feedback, test that engagement, how well it goes on a small scale. I mean, you should be able to let set things up so the data can speak for itself. So the question then becomes, you'll learn some things, and it's entirely possible to keep iterating and pivoting and continuing on for a long time. And to some extent, that's valid. Having an ongoing innovation process that starts with one idea to look at growing your business, and then evolves or pivots into another one, and then another one, and it's actually just becomes almost a routine part of your business, is valid as well. But I guess the point is, if you've got a specific idea and the data indicates that for whatever reason right now it isn't compelling, you either need to finish up or look at how you can learn from that and pivot to the next idea.
Okay, thank you, Adam. That's all the questions we've received. So thank you everyone for coming. If you do have any further questions, or you want to talk through any of this further, or discuss any of your own projects, we're happy to talk. You can reach Adam at intranel.com and me at andrew@intranel.com. I've posted the contact details in the chat as well. We'll also send out a slide deck to everybody and a link to the recording of the session once we've got that ready. It was great to have you all here. I hope everybody enjoyed Adam's presentation. I know I did, and I hope you've all been enjoying Tech Week. And everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hey, folks.